All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to Views from the Capitol. This is our fake duck edition. The end of the year always tends to be busy. So we're going to talk about what we expect to see through the rest of the year. We ask that you keep yourself muted to cut down on the background noise. Any questions you have can go into the chat. We will answer those as we go. So please don't save them till the end, but then we will have forgotten what we said at the beginning. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat. For those of you that don't know me, I am Jennifer Smith, Director of Government Relations at MASB, and with me is DeShandria Bedingfield. She's our Policy Analyst and Grassroots Coordinator, and she's going to be assisting me with the update today. So we only have a few days left of legislative session. They'll be back next week, and they have, I think, 9 days scheduled with a possibility of 12. We're hoping for the 9, but right now they're looking to get out about that second week of December. With a third week planned. So we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. There's a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of things we're not sure about. So if there are issues that we don't bring up, please be sure to ask those questions too. We want to be able to answer whatever's on your mind. And I'm going to turn to DeShandria to get us started.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to touch on a little bit of advocacy housekeeping. So if you aren't getting our news from the Capitol emails that go out every Friday, please sign up. I'll drop a link in the chat in a little bit, but please sign up. News from Capitol comes out every Friday. We try to keep it basically whatever's happening in legislature that week and keep you all updated. Also, if you go on our website, and you can definitely check out the bills that the GR department is watching for you all, of course, and any other things. So this recording will be on the Advocate website as well. So please make sure you sign up, and also make sure if you are signing up for News for the Capitol, you click the email opt-in box. That way you actually get the emails. So that's an important piece of it. So please do that. I'm going to touch on the Student Scholarship Opportunity Program, so vouchers that you've probably heard about in the news. Just a little bit about that. So that is Senate Bill 687 and Senate Bill 688, along with House Bill 5404 and House Bill 5505. So these bills will set up student scholarship opportunity programs for eligible students. These funds will go to private schools. So it would include, so these dollars would go to after school programs and private tutoring. And obviously this is unconstitutional because it goes direct aid to non-public schools. So this would be unconstitutional in Michigan. And also it will reduce school aid fund and GF dollars by a significant amount. And MASB, and along with other education associations across the state, did send a veto letter to the governor. And she did actually veto both packages on November 9th, which I actually got to attend the veto ceremony. In the usual fashion, it's a bill signing ceremony. So this time around, she actually got together and vetoed both of the bills. So that was something that was really cool and a really good experience. And I also got the very exclusive pen that the governor uses. So it's really cool. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who helped in the advocacy efforts of calling your legislators and contacting your legislators on both bills that the governor vetoed. But it doesn't seem like this vouchers will be going away anytime soon. There has been a ballot initiative created to circumvent the governor's veto and to create these scholarship opportunities for indirect aid to non-public schools. Right now, the bill the initiative is waiting for petition language approval by the State Board of Canvassers. MASB and other education associates will be weighing in and obviously following the process, and we'll keep you all up to date. But thank you all for your advocacy efforts. And I'll turn it back to you, Jen.
For those of you that were with us at ALC last week, you've heard a lot of this. We don't have a lot of new details to add to the things that we gave then, but maybe there's a couple new topics. So again, if you have questions as we go, please put them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. So first, we'll start with Senate Bill 664. This bill would allow for students in quarantine due to COVID reasons to be able to be counted in attendance as long as they were learning either remotely or through packets. And they met a few criteria. They had to either be COVID positive, they had to be have someone in their family who was COVID positive, ordered into the quarantine due to policies by the health department or the school, And then the last piece that has caused us a little bit of issue is have been exposed to a cluster that is COVID positive. And that cluster is 3 or more people. And so that is the one piece we're trying to change in this bill to make that just a single exposure. In the case of a elementary school teacher who is walking around the classroom, if they are the positive person, then that whole classroom wouldn't count as being exposed because she's only one person. So we're working on the cluster language. Unfortunately, right now, this bill appears to be very stalled in the House. There are representatives, including Representative Albert, who's sort of spearheading this, who don't see the need for this bill. So if you see a need for this bill in your district, you need to be talking to your state representatives. They need to know that there are districts that are closing due to COVID quarantines, due to not having enough staff, not having enough kids in the classroom. But also to remember that the under 75%, that's how you count your day. But if you remain in school with under 75% attendance, it's a financial penalty. It's not as much as if you miss the entire day. And MDE recently put out a memo on this explaining the difference between counting your days and hours and where your attendance thresholds need to be. So they're trying to help with information in case we don't get something that excuses those people. And if you haven't seen that memo, I will drop it in the chat right now. This just came out last week. So again, we suggest letting your representatives know if this is an issue. And if you can let us know, we're trying to keep track as we have meetings to be able to say, here's how many districts have closed. We just got word of a handful up north that are closed today and tomorrow because of the cases that were going up at the end of last week. So they closed for this week, shorter week, easier to do, but it's still 2 lost days. So that bill currently sits in the House Education Committee and passed the Senate unanimously. So we hope to get some traction, but right now we're really struggling to get any traction on it. 5424 is one you've heard a lot about lately. This bill was introduced by Representative Hornberger and heard in her committee pretty quickly. It would not allow for public dollars to go toward paying for association membership dues for either an education association or a trade union. This is very much aimed at the statewide organizations, but the collateral damage are all the smaller organizations that people are a member of. And so we're looking at this not just through MASB's lens, but through the lens of your Science Teachers Association, your band association, orchestra, foreign language, all of those little associations out there that really help your teachers with mentoring, with PD, with all of that. They would be devastated by something like this if districts couldn't pay the dues of those people to be members of their district. Don testified to the benefits of membership of MASB, that we're not a lobbying organization. That's just one department that we have. We do so much more for our members, as you all know, and the money that we spend on things for you, the money that we can save districts by being part of SETSEG and purchasing things, and MISEC, the energy group, that there is a larger savings than there are dues you pay. And so we've started to have conversations with legislators about those various savings, about what we really do as an association versus just thinking I'm the face of it. And we started to get some traction right after the hearing, enough that her second hearing, which was supposed to be held last Tuesday, was not held. She pulled the bill from the committee because she didn't have the votes for it. So we are still continue to talk to the committee members. We've branched out to talk to many of the House members as well, to let them know exactly what this bill needs. We are hearing that there could be amendments to exempt things like MHSIA, which ironically is not a dues-based organization, so this bill doesn't affect them, but to exempt things like Future Farmers of America. And I just wonder, as they start to go down that road, are they really going to be able to exempt every little organization? And then how do we list the ones we exempt and list the ones that you're not allowed to pay for? And then it just becomes really political and really heavy lift. So we're waiting to see what happens, but we're not sitting on our heels on this at all, for sure. This is a pretty big deal. So we will continue to have those conversations. If you're talking to your reps, be sure to tell them, the benefits that you find being part of our organization, but not just that, but the list of organizations that your district belongs to and the benefits that each of those have for various reasons. Representative Hornberger testified that these should be dollars in the classroom. And our arguments, our fellow association arguments are that these do benefit the classroom, especially those that are professional development and things like that. A better teacher, a better board member, a better administrator, they make things better in the classroom. And so we don't really buy the idea that the dues spent for us does not benefit the classroom. And that's the conversation we keep having. We do fully expect this bill to come back up probably on Tuesday, not tomorrow, but a week from Tuesday when they come back. House Education Committee meets at 9 a.m. We'll probably hear on Monday whether or not they're going to meet or not. But we do know this is a priority of hers, and she is pushing really hard to get something done. And so we just keep sounding the alarm on the other side that this is more than just dues to MASB. There's so much more to this. And as of last count, she still does not have votes to get it out of the House or to get it out of committee. She has a handful of her own party that don't want to vote on this because they know that there's other issues. So we'll keep working on it as you talk to your representatives, talk to them about this as well. And this is one that if it gets traction, you will certainly hear from us and you will get an alert, which is DeShandria talked about the News from the Capitol and the Evocate site. That's the same database we use for our alerts. So if you're not getting news from the Capitol, you're not going to get our legislative alerts either. So make sure you do that. Because if this one gets traction at all, you'll certainly be receiving an alert from us. So question about 664, if it passes, if we have less than 75% attendance, we get the financial penalty, but can count the day. No, two different things. If it passes, you would be able to count those kids that are in quarantine, but still learning. So either virtually or packet, however they're learning, you'd be able to count them in your daily attendance. So you hopefully wouldn't hit that 75% threshold. Right now, you would take a financial penalty, and that's all spelled out in the memo that I posted in the chat earlier. There is a deduction for the shortfalls, and it is applied to the percentage of attendance below the 75%. So there's your rate would be different depending on what you're doing, but there are examples in that memo that I put in the chat. I highly recommend looking at it. I think it explains it a little better than I'm doing. But if the bill passes, you'd be able to count more kids just because their butt wasn't in their seat. If they're learning at home, you could count them. Right now, you can't. If they're not there, they're not there unless they're learning under 21F, which is the online learning piece. Sure, I can repost the memo. I will do that right now. All right. So then the next group, or the next bill is Senate Bills 380 to 383. These deal with dyslexia and screening for dyslexia. And we've been working pretty closely with the bill sponsors on these. These are certainly a work in progress. They've come a long way from where they were. One of our concerns was that they were going to change the teacher certification test beginning next year to say that you had to meet all of these different reading goals in the teacher certification test. And our argument was that there's a second bill in the package that would require universities to teach those things, which means you're going to test the people who have graduated from college on things that the colleges haven't taught yet. So we were able to get a change in that effective date to move it out so that this year's college freshmen or next year's college freshmen would have 4 years of school before they would have to take the teacher certification test that included these new things. So that way we have time for the universities to get the new things into their curriculum before we're trying to certify the teachers based on those things. We had a lot of concerns that would exacerbate our teacher shortage, and the sponsors listened and heard us and made that change. So we're happy to see that. The main bill is still a work in progress and there's still concerns with it. We don't want it to duplicate what we already do under third grade reading. We already screen from kindergarten to third grade on various things. And if there are holes in our screening, yes, we need to plug those. But to start over with a whole new set of screening requirements just is going to duplicate those efforts. So we're making sure that that does not happen. The other piece that has been somewhat problematic, especially with our friends in special education, is that the bill talks about how and when to refer for an IEP or a 504. And as you know, that is covered by federal law and by some state laws. Again, we don't want there to be multiple laws on the books that tell you how to do referrals for special education differently. And we need to make sure that we are following federal law. And that's the big concern. So our friends in the Special Education Administrators Association have been working on that piece. And we've all been working together with them, with MASA, with MASSP, trying to make sure that we do catch those kids and that we make sure our screenings are working, but not to the detriment of the teachers and the staff who have to do them, or to giving multiple assessments to children. We don't want to keep adding assessments. So those bills will continue to be worked on. There were subs adopted just before Thanksgiving break, but we were told even then there's more subs coming. So we expect more changes. We also expect more hearings. And I do think that you will see these reported from committee before the end of the year. I don't know if they get out of the Senate before the end of the year, but this is definitely something that will continue to move with the goal of this group of sponsors of actually getting it done this time and getting it done before the end of next year. So it's not something that's really going to hit our districts until next school year at the earliest. But we're still working out the details and we'll keep you posted as this continues to go through the process. And then one last state bill I wanted to talk about is Senate Bill 184 and 185. These deal with Filter First. The Filter First program is a program that says that you replace all of your water filter, all of your drinking fountains or potable water with filtered water. So you use those like water bottle filling stations instead of a drinking fountain sort of thing. We had opposed this to begin with because it's a huge expense with no money attached. But then with the ARP money that came into the state, a Senate bill was passed, it's in the House now, that includes an appropriation for this. So it's a pretty decent sized appropriation to give grants to schools to replace your drinking fountains. What it doesn't have is that continuity of funding. So once you get all of this in, you still need to inspect and replace filters and all of that. And that's going to be a cost that keeps going. So we're hopeful we can keep having that conversation as these bills move, that there are continuing costs to having these new water filters. It's not a one and done thing. The other piece of it that we're working with the bill sponsor on is the reporting requirement. And right now it would require you to report to every parent in a school where you have a drinking fountain that has to come offline because lead levels are too high. You would have to send a copy of that report, of the test report, to every parent in the school. And so we sat down with the bill sponsor and pointed out in some buildings where you have a huge building, you have parents or kids in that school that are never in areas of that building. And so could we focus on those affected? It also does not require you to tell your staff, which you would think would be a good thing to do. So we're working with them to say notification of affected staff and affected parents, not to send the test results, but to send a notice stating that the testing was done and here's the results versus sending the entire test. And then in that, it would have to include the health effects of lead exposure and ways to reduce childhood lead exposure. That's already required by law, or I'm sorry, required by the bill. And the department would have to put that information together. You'd have to include it in your notice. The other thing that they're willing to do is be more clear about how you tell your parents. So the way it's written now, it doesn't say anything. So what we want to do instead is include, you can contact your parents in the way that you communicate most often with them. So if that's email, if that's snail mail, if that's text message, however you normally send information home to your parents, that's how you would have to send this home to your parents. All of this would be by 2024, 2025 school year that you would have to have these filtered bottle filling stations and filtered faucets in place of everything else. You'd have to have a plan in place on how you're going to inspect them and replace them. And again, with the money that's coming down, we hope out of ARP that would help in this realm. But there is a line that says if the legislature doesn't fund this program, the schools don't have to follow the law. So I do think that we're going to have continued conversations about the ongoing costs of the filters. But as you've seen in the news, this lead in our water is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And so this was a step in the right direction to try to mitigate that in our schools. It definitely is a better step than what we've seen in the past, which was all out retooling of our schools, making sure you had no lead pipes, making sure like everything was clean and new and shiny. This goes the filter route first, so that we can filter out lead and other harmful contaminants without requiring every district in the state to replace all of their lines coming into their buildings. Do you have any other questions on state-related issues? I do have a little federal thing and an NSBA piece because I saw the question in the chat. But are there other state issues you're hearing about, questions you have? Yes, so filter first. The question is this to replace all drinking fountains in schools and add filters? And yes, it would be all drinking fountains and anywhere that you have potable water. So if you've got a faucet in your kitchen, a faucet in your science room, anywhere that you have water that could possibly be handled by the student, it would have to be filtered. And so that's where the money would come in for you to replace those things or to add filters to the faucets that you already have. Any update from MIOSHA regarding the ETS? MIOSHA is not going to issue theirs at this point. Late last week, sorry, it's Monday, can't be earlier this week. Late last week, OSHA came out and said that they would suspend the ETS, the emergency standard that would require testing or vaccinations of all employees if you had 100 or more employees. They have suspended that for now. The Fifth Circuit had put a temporary injunction in place. They came back and said that they do think there are legitimate concerns and that this does warrant a court case. And so they have put an injunction on the rules. So OSHA said, we'll put a hold on the standard until this is sorted out. So because OSHA did that before MIOSHA's came out, MIOSHA is not issuing right now. So we won't see anything from them until OSHA moves forward. And as we reported before, MIOSHA is expected to just adopt the OSHA standards word for word. They have said they will not be adding anything and they can't take anything away. So they will just be adding that to our rules. And once MIOSHA rules, that's when schools are pulled in, because under MIOSHA, schools are included because we adopt, we are an OSHA plan state, which means we adopt what OSHA does, and it covers all of our public and private employers. So we will still have to wait for MIOSHA, but they are waiting to see what happens at the federal level. So we'll keep you updated as we hear. I'm sure it's going to be big news as well. And I would say if you hear it in the news before you hear it from us, expect MIOSHA to follow suit in about a week. They were already moving in that direction. They were getting ready to go, ready to issue when this court case came down. So they're just waiting until we know that there is an OSHA rule before they put the MIOSHA rule in place. Any other questions on state-related issues? Banning race-related curriculum. So this is an interesting thing watching in the legislature. There are two bills. There's one in the House and it's now in the Senate, and there's one in the Senate floor. So the one that passed the House says that you can't teach racist curriculum. It's worded a little funny. It still takes us down this road of who determines what we can say and what we can't say. How do we implement it? And how do we teach history under this weird umbrella of we can't talk about people being racist? So that bill has passed the House. It passed on a party line vote, I believe, and is now sitting in the Senate. It doesn't specifically mention critical race theory. The bill sponsor kept saying over and over, we're not talking about critical race theory, yet it's like right on the edges of critical race theory. Then on the Senate side, their bill, sponsored by Senator Tice, is banning flat out anything dealing with critical race theory and anything dealing with the 1619 project. Both bills also include lists of things that you couldn't teach or that would be considered banned under these bills. That bill came out of House committee. It is sitting on the House floor. I don't know if it has the votes right now. It does go farther than the House bill, but both bills are very problematic in our eyes. When you start listing things that you can and can't say in a classroom, that really is going to inhibit conversations in the classroom. And we don't want to see what's happening in other states. We've heard reports out of Texas where people are afraid really to teach anything dealing with that could be seen as racist, which is a lot of our history. Like, how do you teach about the Civil War if you can't talk about race? How do you teach about some of these things? And then in New Hampshire, we saw a group go out and say, they basically put a bounty on teachers' heads and said, report to us if you see a teacher teaching these things, and we will pay you X amount of money, and then we'll go after the teacher. We don't want things like that happening in our state. We have enough to deal with on top of just the way this would treat our classrooms. We don't need that chilling effect on our public education classrooms. This should be where you can have those discussions, where you can ask hard questions and really think them through and how we got to where we are. And it always strikes me as like history is doomed to repeat itself, especially if you don't learn it. So I think that those bills, I think, will start to get a little bit of traction. I feel that there are some in the legislature that would like to use these as campaign pieces as we go into next year. But at this point, I don't know how they reconcile them because they are different. And so 460 goes much farther than 5097, both bad, but it's how are they going to deal with that? If 460 gets out of the Senate, is the House going to deal with it when they pass their own bill? And is the Senate going to bring up the House bill when they pass their own bill? So they may have their own politics to deal with. But in the meantime, these are not bills that we support. We'll continue to work against them. But these are things that are very politically motivated, not really policy motivated. Any other state questions? All right, well, if you think of any, just drop them in there. I'm going to touch on the feds real quick. A couple of things that have been out and about. The bipartisan infrastructure bill was signed by the president last week. This includes a few items for K-12 schools. This infrastructure bill is very much based on real infrastructure. That's not the right way to say it, but like roads, bridges, water, broadband, not people infrastructure as some people have referred to it as. But it does include $65 billion for broadband investments to help families get access to the internet and get devices that access the internet. $5 billion for clean energy school buses, $500 million over 5 years for energy efficiency improvement grants for schools and nonprofits. $200 million over 5 years to deal with lead contamination in school drinking water. That is a small part of a much bigger lead contamination, clean drinking water piece. And then it does reauthorize and extend the Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act, which is a really long name for those districts that get federal funds in lieu of taxes, where there is a lot of federal forest land. And so we have UP districts that benefit from that money. There's 700 counties across the country that have a lot of federal forest land. And this program was set to expire. And now it's been reauthorized so that those payments in lieu of taxes can continue for those districts. And then you've heard more about Build Back Better or budget reconciliation, whatever the case, whatever you want to call it. So under the Build Back Better, this is the budget reconciliation. This expired, the current budget expires December 5th. So they have to pass something. The last time at October 1, they passed this continuation budget. There's now rumblings we're going to end up with another continuation budget because we have a week. The House passed this budget 2 weeks ago, and the Senate hasn't now. We don't know what the Senate's going to do with it. So the details we have now could be totally different than the details we get later. So I just wanted to bring it up just as an update as to where the federal budget stands. If they don't pass a continuation budget by December 5, the government shuts down. Ideally, they wanted to pass the full budget by then. So I don't know where they're going to be. We have a meeting with our federal counterparts on Monday to get an update, but I would expect a continuation budget to happen. I don't think anybody wants to shut the government down just before the holidays if they can't get an agreement on the Build Back Better plan. So those two things are the same at this point, your budget and the Build Back Better. So those words are being used interchangeably as you listen to the news and hear things like that. So that sits in the Senate. We're waiting to see what the Senate does on it. And when we have better details, when we know what the details are going to be, we will share those with you. But right now we feel it's premature because it could change so much in the Senate than what we're looking at and that came out of the House. Are there any questions on the federal things? I'm gonna go back to a couple in the chat. So should we call our senators and have them vote no on 460? Yes, always call your senators and talk to them. It's a great thing to do. But yes, that is sitting on the Senate floor. It is not scheduled for a vote at this point, but that doesn't mean you can't call them and tell them that you don't like it. So that certainly is a reason to reach out to them. And flexibility for virtual programs like last year. This is what we're trying to do in 664, and that has stalled. So at this point, there is no flexibility beyond what you had pre-pandemic. So MDE has put out some things on this. They've got a couple memos dealing with 21F and virtual learning and how to count virtual learning. So all of that is under MDE, but unfortunately, there's nothing included in the budget, and we have seen nothing come through to change that. And that's where we're having these conversations that, yeah, it would be nice if we had more flexibility still, and then push back that they don't see a need for it. And kids should be in school, kids should be face-to-face. I know that's frustrating for some areas of our state, but that's where we're at right now. Any other questions? So I was asked, and I appreciate the direct message, but it might as well be addressed to everyone about NSBA and their letter to President Biden. If you were at the conference, Don addressed this as well. We have sent emails out with information about our stance and where we're coming from, why we're there. But at this point, just as a quick way of history, you all know the letter came out in late September. It was sent to the president asking for federal assistance to help protect board members and administrators. The idea behind the letter was noble. The words chosen for the letter, however, were not words we would have chosen. MASB, as well as other state affiliates, were not consulted on the drafting of the letter. We were told they were working on something, but we did not see the letter before it went out. There were Michigan examples cited in the letter, but those were pulled from news reports. They were not asked, we had not volunteered any of that to them to use as examples. So we were as surprised as everyone else on the language included in that letter, and the phrase that gets the most attention is the word domestic terrorists. No, we do not believe parents are domestic terrorists. We have responded to anyone who has asked, and then in full to our membership to explain that. Other states have pulled out. I think we're at 13 or 14 right now. The number that you hear in the news sometimes, which is much higher, are people who have condemned the action publicly, but they have not necessarily ended their membership to NSBA. But I believe we are at 13 or 14 states that have officially ended their membership in NSBA. Virginia was the most recent one. I think that was just on Thursday or Friday. So we've had a lot of these conversations internally. Don has had a lot of conversations with the fellow execs, both in the central region and in other parts of the country. And he was quick to respond when the letter came out. And one of our board of directors, Don Hugler, serves on the NSBA board of directors. The board of directors did not see the letter either. So it was handled very, very poorly. And Don made that abundantly clear that this is not the way this organization should be working. This is not something we can support. But as we've had these conversations, and even as we talked to many of you at conference, We have not ended our relationship with NSBA yet. We've already paid our dues and they're not refunding dues. And Don's feeling and Don Hubler's feeling on the board is that we need our voice to stay there. Someone needs to hold them accountable. Someone needs to tell them that these are not the right things and that there should be better processes in place. There is a new executive director coming on board, I believe any day now. They expedited their search for that so that the interim director could be removed and we could get a new director in there with a better view on how to handle things like this. NSBA has hired a crisis communications group to work with them, so maybe they can do a little bit better about this too. And there's a lot of talk about how are we going to do things like this in the future. Like if you are sending something of this magnitude, it shouldn't be a surprise to your 50 members that you sent it. So Don really feels strongly that for now, we will continue to watch what they're doing. We will continue to review how many states have pulled out. But for now, he believes that the best way to address this problem with NSBA is to be involved and to address it directly to them. So we do remain as part of NSBA. Our dues for this year will expire on June 30th. And you can be assured these are ongoing conversations at our board meeting tables, at our board of directors table, and that we're watching everything that's going on. We were asked by Representative Hornberger and 34 members of the Michigan House to remove ourselves from NSBA. We have sent a letter in response to that last week, the end of last week. That will be coming to your inboxes today. I believe it'll be out shortly this afternoon. It will have a copy of both the letter that was sent to us and Don's response to it. That was sent to all of the signatories on the letter, as well as the handful of press that reached out to us when the letter went out. We found out about the letter initially through the press. We did not receive it before it hit the press. And at this point, I don't think we've received it yet. So we have made sure that everyone on the letter received it first, and then have shared it with the handful of people that Don did interviews with. And as I said, you'll be receiving both this afternoon through our regular membership email, just so that you know what's going on too. We just decided Friday afternoon is not a time to send this important information, so we held it until this afternoon. An update on the in-person conference. So yes, NSBA is holding their advocacy conference in person in January. There is a virtual option if you aren't comfortable coming to DC. If you go to register, there's a spot when you register that you can register virtually instead. We do not know at this point what we're doing as far as the Michigan breakfast that we do with the senators, nor what we're going to do with the Michigan lunch that we do beforehand. We believe we will hold the lunch. The question is if the Hill is fully open, if our elected officials, our delegation want to meet in person. So we are working on a lot of those details to figure out the safest and best way for us to still facilitate that lobbying time, but not put anyone at risk. And I've talked to NSBA. They said that the Hill is hit or miss for offices that are open. I don't believe the Capitol is open to the public yet. So some of this depends on what happens out there, but it is an ongoing conversation with us, NSBA, and with the various Michigan-based lobbyists that go with us and that help us facilitate those meetings. We're trying to figure out, as I said, the best and safest way. So there will be more information coming on that. To be perfectly frank, we needed to get through an annual conference before we focused on this one. But we do need to figure that out so that you can make plans. Our goal will be to hold the Michigan lunch like we normally do. That one has a cost to it, but it's for all of the people who come out. It is the breakfast and the meetings on the Hill that are more up in the air. And so we'll be working on that. I know in past years, we've had a really large room that make it very easy for us to spread out. And we'll be having those conversations with our contacts to see what's the best way. At this point, we do have 32 people registered to go, so we may still have the biggest group, especially with 14 states not belonging to NSBA. And I must say that is part of what we need to consider. If you have already paid your dues or your registration for the conference and MASB withdraws from NSBA, you're no longer a member. And that brings up questions as to how do we handle that conference and the plans you're already making. So that's the other weird little piece of everything we need to consider when it comes to backing out of that organization. Any other questions? Issues we didn't cover? Things bugging your district? All right. Well, if you do come up with questions, Deshandra and I are here for you to answer those anytime. Just feel free to reach out and contact us. We have recorded this and we will post it. So if you have fellow board members that would like to watch it later, it should be available after Thanksgiving. And as always, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being advocates for your district. What we really need that more than ever is that voice on the ground. So we really appreciate the support that you give us as we go out and advocate on your behalf. Have a great day and enjoy your Thanksgiving.